In 2019, I bought this. This is the Harbor Freight 10x18 benchtop lathe. Woodturning was something that had caught my eye a few times on social media, and I had also inherited some turning tools from my late uncle. But it wasn't until I came across Greg of Natural Selection Studio that I really committed. Back in those days, he would turn pieces he called podlets. They looked something like this. I was just amazed by the natural movement of the wood and the flower, and how he was able to turn the stems so thin. I even bought one for myself to kind of take a closer look at everything that he'd done, and it's still sitting in my dining room on the shelf as a decorative piece. I told myself that one day I would be able to do it. I tried many times over the years on the Harbor Freight lathe, but because of its size and limited speed and just kind of general vibration, I always had the flower explode or the stem snap. But I continued to try, and each time got a little better than the last. I spent time learning how to properly use the spindle gouge and cut as many species as I could get my hands on in all the grain orientations I could think of. I practiced turning wetwood and discovered its limitations. I even built out a sharpening station in the shop. I put in the hours and I made the progress that was necessary to get there. And it wasn't until I picked up this new Grizzly lathe that I felt really confident I could actually do this. I studied some older videos from Natural Selection and buckled down and just went for it. So here I'm cutting a tenon on the end of the piece. This will ultimately be waste, but it allows me to seat it into this lathe chuck, and that'll hold it in place without the tailstock. And I'll use the tailstock now to help center it on the chuck, and then just crank that down. Now I can start removing bulk material. So now I can adjust the lathe to bring the piece to the edge where it makes it a little easier to cut straight into it and start removing all this end grain. I used a smaller gouge to kind of get the middle there as tight as possible, just because the bigger gouge didn't fit in all the way. So now that the end grain's all taken care of, I'll slide the lathe back and get the tailstock back in there. Use a little piece of towel to safely wedge the tailstock in there without damaging the wood. That tightened down a little bit, and now I can start doing the final shaping of the piece. So this is where the end is going to get really thin. This is when we're going to get the stem cut in. So at this point, just sit back and enjoy a lathe montage. What you're seeing now is the successful turning of one of these podlets, but there was actually 2 attempts before this that still failed. On the first one, I left the flour end a little too thick, which meant when it dried out, the wood didn't really move much, so I didn't get any of the whimsical waves or fun movements that you could see on Greg's pieces. And then on the second one, I got a little too ahead of myself and cut the flour too thin, and it just broke apart. Did a little bit of light sanding, but while the wood's still wet, it doesn't really work that well. It kind of just clogs up the sandpaper. You can see it on there. But it was enough to get the stem evened out. So there it is. Really delicately removing the tailstock in that towel, and then just sliding the piece a little bit up in the chuck so I can get a pole saw in there and cut it free from the waste material at the end there. This was quite nerve-wracking just because that stem is so fragile, and if this thing dropped or my finger caught it the wrong way, it could easily break that stem. Most evenings I like to think about what I've accomplished or finished or made that day, what I have to show for. Some days it's really easy to answer. Maybe I finished a vase or made a bowl. But some days I don't walk out of the shop with anything physical in hand, and that can sometimes be kind of tough. But those are the days I have to remind myself that I have made something. It's progress, and it turns out progress is just as valuable as anything else, as progress got me here, finally able to recreate the very thing that inspired this journey to begin with. Thanks for watching.